ideas and brain exchange is a process as old as humankind is. But circulation of ideas is something different from the situation when producers of ideas decide to use just one-way ticket. Even the actual mass migration to Europe may appear to be a blessing for target countries. But what about the intellectual vacuum left behind by fresh immigrants in their countries of origin? That's the problem. Let me first thank to our partner, the Friedrich Naumann Stiftung, for the cooperation in preparations of this panel. And let me introduce our moderator, Mr. Rainer Adam, who is the regional director of Friedrich Naumann Stiftung, Germany. I'd like to ask panelists to take seats here on the floor, and I'd like to ask the moderator to introduce panelists, and then after short presentations, the audience, you ladies and gentlemen, are welcome to ask your questions. Please, when asking the question, introduce yourself and try to be brief because our time is limited. We have a few minutes more than 1 hour for this working breakfast. At 9:15 we have to leave for the opening session upstairs. So now you have the last chance to help yourself. There's a buffet, so take your tea or coffee and something to eat and enjoy the debate. Thank you. Please, Dr. Adam.
Hello, can you hear me? No? Now. Okay, good. Yes. All right. Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all a very good welcome. It's great to see you here. This is the first working breakfast of the conference, and the session is called The Challenge of Brain Drain. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Forum 2000 Foundation for inviting us to this event. I participated last year, loved it very much, and I'm glad we are here. I wish us all a very fruitful debate and an interesting exchange of ideas. I've been introduced by the moderator, or by you, thank you. If you want to know more about me, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. But as the regional director for East and Southeast Europe, I'm in charge of our programs in 22 countries, including Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey. Over the last weeks, pictures of desperate asylum seekers dominated news reporting in Europe. The screens of our TVs were inundated with people on the move and filed with the reactions of resident populations, the police and politicians making statements about asylum and migration. This might have made us forget that behind all the hype around these issues, a no less serious challenge is lurking, and this challenge is the topic of today, the phenomenon of brain drain. Brain drain is a slang term. According to Merriam-Webster and the Cambridge English Dictionary, brain drain can be defined as the exodus or departure of educated and professional people from one country, economic sector or field for another, usually for better pay and or living conditions. Economists, and there are a few economists on this panel, also call brain drain human capital flight. The term brain drain suggests that something is lost, drained from something, from somewhere. It reflects the position of the country, region, or sector of origin, the loser, so to say. But brains are also gained somewhere else. Alas, human ingenuity is not a binary variable. Life is not black and white. We have circular migration, reverse migration, temporary migration, and many more forms. Some gainers of skilled migration are also losers at the same time. For instance, the country I come from, Germany. Germany is losing many of its prime brains, you can say, but they're also receiving brains. Then there is the phenomenon of remittances, often forgotten, the retransfer of skills and knowledge and information. In short, brain drain is a very complex phenomenon. But brain drain is not only happening between countries, often the main focus of the debate, but it's also happening within countries. Some economic sectors losing brains, for instance, agriculture, and others are gaining it. And then brain drain is also happening between regions. Some remote regions are losing young people and brains, and will be populated by, let's say, older people and maybe the children. Fortunately, we have people here with us on this panel who have studied the phenomenon of skilled migration and dealt with concrete outcomes, consequences, and policies. Please allow me to introduce our panel, the 4 participants in our panel, and I would like to start with the only lady on the panel, Ms. Sandra Švaljek, researcher and former deputy and acting mayor of Zagreb, Croatia. Ms. Švaljek holds a PhD in economics, and she is the director of the Institute of Economics, or she was until 2013, before she entered politics and local government. Then we have, to my right, Professor Surendra Munshi from the Indian Institute of Management in Kolkata. Professor Munshi is also a member of the Program Council of the Forum 2000 Foundation, and he holds a PhD from Bielefeld University in Germany. Then we have Professor Krassen Stanchev, to my left, of Sofia University and former CEO of the Institute of Market Economics in Bulgaria, Bulgaria's first free market economics think tank. Professor Stanchev was involved in various reform efforts, from the planning economy to the market economy. He's been advisor and chairman of the Constitutional Assembly of Bulgaria. And last but not least, we have Mr. Bogdan Patru from Romania, former EU affairs advisor to the Romanian president. He is a director of SmartLink Communications, sounds very sexy, and an expert on energy markets, legal and EU affairs. But before we start, let me briefly explain to you the procedures of our session. First, we will watch together a 3-minute, 20-second long animated infographics video presenting some of the general facts as regards brain drain. Then we have about 5 to 7 minutes statements from each of our panelists, and after which the panelists discuss among themselves, and I will be the timekeeper, and remember, I'm German, so I will try to steer the debate among the panelists and also involve you, the audience. And this is why you have on your desks these cards. There is first a card with 3 questions, and then you have voting cards. We, as a political foundation, we love voting. So voting cards in green and in red. And I will ask you at a certain point in time of the deliberations about your view on those 3 questions, which are on, too much equipment, which are on your desk, on your tables. And you will also see the 3 questions in the animation. Unfortunately, the panelists, they cannot see the animation well because we have the screen behind us, but and they don't know it. But it just summarizes some of the facts and looks at the phenomenon from a broader perspective. So this I've done. All right, yeah, we're ready to go. So I wish us all interesting morning, and the video can come. Thank you. After we have had this brief introduction on our theme, I would like to open, let's say, our discussion with the panelists. And Sandra, I would like maybe you to ask with you to share with us your ideas on the topic.
Okay. First of all, hello everyone, and it's nice to be here. What I wanted to say, what came to my mind is that the phenomenon is not only the brain drain, but also the drain of capacity and skills and courage. Because people who decide to migrate, to leave the country, they're on average more courageous than the others. They are somehow self-selected according to several criteria. They are not only better educated, but have more self-confidence. And in that respect, their leaving the country is quite a loss for the country of origin. I can tell something from my own experience, because I'm the one who has to some extent encouraged the brain drain as a director of the Institute of Economics. Well, according to my opinion, the schools of economics and the doctoral studies of economics in Croatia are not providing good education, and since the institute was employing young researchers, we had to send them to postdoctoral studies somewhere, and I have decided to send them abroad. For example, some of them have even studied here in Prague, in Surendra, you know that, and some have studied, for example, in Slovenia, because Slovenian school of postdoctoral studies in economics are better than in Croatia. Some have studied in Spain, in US, or in Germany, and those people, in spite of the fact that their contract with the institute was binding, they decided to leave the country, to leave Croatia, and to stay abroad. They all came to me and asked me about my opinion on that, and I have said, no one can blame you. If you have better opportunities where you have studied in Germany or Spain or US, then you should stay there, because you have a one-time opportunity, and you have to use this opportunity. Maybe I have encouraged the loss for not only for the institute, but also for Croatia. But I think that for those people, I cannot make any better advice than to advise them to stay where they have better opportunities. So, and I don't feel guilty for that. So I think that they have benefited personally, individually. I think that the recipient countries have benefited because they got very good, very motivated people. Of course, maybe Croatia have lost, but I think that Croatia did not fight for those people. And you know, I think that it's up to the politicians to think about that and to perceive that as their fault. In Croatia, well, I will say something for Croatia. We are right now facing quite a high brain drain, maybe higher than you would expect, but after 7 years of consecutive economic crisis, you cannot expect anything else but the young people to leave the country, because they don't see the perspective in Croatia. There is a high youth unemployment, there is a high employment, perspectives to get a job in Croatia are quite slim, and there is a pronounced negative selection. So those who get jobs are not the best people, but the people who are best connected to whomever. So there is quite a big problem in Croatia. However, we don't have the data. Because you only have the data when those people unregister from some Croatian evidences. And those who unregister, they are maybe 1/3 of all the people that leave the country, because the other 2/3, they don't decide to unregister because at one point of time they might come back to Croatia, so they opt to stay registered in Croatia. So I think that the problem is much more pronounced than we see it from the data. The data show that every year Croatia loses 10 to 12,000 people. But I was in Germany this year, in Mainz, and I was talking to the people from Croatian embassy, and they told us that after EU accession, 36,000 Croats ask for the working permits only in Germany. So 36,000, and according to our data, there are only 10 to 12,000 immigrants from Croatia in 1 year. So the numbers are much more serious than we see it. But politicians don't care. Actually, they don't care.
Okay. Well, you used your time very efficiently as an economist, less than the 7 minutes. Okay. I will stay with Eastern Europe and move a little further east. I myself, I'm a resident in Sofia, Bulgaria too, and so Krassen is from Sofia. So would you add a story of Bulgaria, please?
I will start with my personal romance with brain drain. And it's very simple. I have been always supportive of brain drain. It started very early. Because of my background, I was a program director of Open Society Fund in the beginning of the 90s. And I personally, for 1 year, signed about 3,500 scholarships abroad.
So you were worse than me.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay, we'll give prizes later.
I was convinced that this is a good thing, to have the liberty of people to travel, to study, to contribute to their own fate, and to contribute, if they want, to other countries or other groups of people, organizations, prosperity. So later, Bulgaria's story is basically the following. Bulgaria witnessed a very harsh decline of living standards at the beginning of 96, when other countries, we were in the same group, we were basically doing roughly the same success of restoring the prosperity levels from previous times. But in 96, Bulgaria plunged into hyperinflation. The poverty rate had risen from 9% of the population to 40% of the population. Then we enjoyed a hyperinflation period. 50% of the banking industry disappeared. The savings dropped down, from 25 to 6% of GDP. So in the period after the hyperinflation, when Bulgaria restored and enjoyed relatively well-sustained growth rate of 6% a year after 98, the situation was already different, and then I started to study the so-called brain drain and migration. So what was the main reason for migration in those years was, of course, the difference in the living standard, as we saw in the infographics. So the difference between Bulgarian living standard and, for example, Greece was 7 times. So now it is different. So between Bulgaria and Spain was 13 times. Between Bulgaria and Germany was 19 times. So how you can keep, young, educated, and entrepreneurial people, to stay in your country? It's impossible. So whatever the program, whatever the intention of the government, it was not possible. So who was benefiting? So we studied at a quite detailed level the story of Bulgaria's migration between 2004 and 2011. So the story is the following. So the country which receives benefits, the country which sends them benefits, there is a correlation between income levels and productivity levels and the brain drain. So whenever the income level rises, the brain drain reduces. That's fairly clear. So the same is with productivity. At the beginning of the period, after whatever, Bulgarian crisis of 97 and the Romanian of 97-98, they had a small banking crisis. So, but after that period, Bulgaria and Romania were at 30% of Germany's productivity. Now they are at 67% of Germany's productivity. There is a return migration. Often Bulgaria enjoys, income of flight, human capital flight from other countries to Bulgaria. So what Bulgaria benefits from now is the brain drain, from Greece to Bulgaria. But if you look at the details, so the major employer in the country is the software and electronics industry. There is hardly any car in the world which does not have a spare part of electronics produced in Bulgaria. They give job, for like 50,000 individuals, and their income is 7 to 8 times higher than the average income in Bulgaria. So these people are movable. They cannot be kept in the country by force. So the benefit for the receiving country was fairly visible in the beginning of, say, the period 98, 99. So then remittances were financing the family budgets of 330,000 households in Bulgaria. So the government welfare programs in those periods, and it was typical, for the entire 20-year period. So Bulgarian government or Bulgarian taxpayers' finance welfare was never more than 40,000 families. Mm-hmm. So in fact, the remittances were fueling, the social welfare or the welfare condition of about 8 times more families than the redistribution to the government. I'm finishing. So
no problem.
What's the current situation is that it's more productivity-driven brain drain rather than income, because Bulgaria, after the crisis of 97, for the last 10 years, between 2004 and 2014, enjoyed the highest growth of real family income in Europe, which is about 60% for 10-year period. So, and this is the highest in Europe, so it has an impact on the decisions of individuals to leave or stay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krassen. Well, I must have scared everybody. You're all beyond your time. Beautiful, beautiful. So we have more time to debate and discuss. But very interesting arguments or issues you mentioned. The effect on the welfare system in the country I had not on my picture yet. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this.
What's important is none of the, at least European migrants, they do not impose costs on the receiving countries' welfare systems.
Mm-hmm.
It's rarely the case, very rarely.
We'll come to this maybe later. Now I would like to take you away from Europe and the problems of Europe, although we will return because we have Bogdan from Romania. But let's go to a very distant place, a place I had the pleasure to work in for a couple of years as region director in New Delhi. I'm glad to have you here, Professor Munshi from Kolkata, and please share with us your ideas on
Thank you indeed. It's a pleasure to be here and in this panel. I would like to start with a few issues offering some clarity on the issue of a question of a brain drain, not because I want to have a deep academic discussion, but because I do think that we need to be a little clearer about the issues involved if we wish to find solutions at national or other levels for the problem called brain drain. Now, my first point is that we often think in terms of brain drain as a movement from one nation to the other, which is true. That's how brain drain is generally understood. But as our moderator also pointed out, it's not just from one nation to the other, but it can be from within the same nation, one region of the nation to the other, from rural to urban and so on. Actually, it can be from one organization to the other. A major, big organization can be taking brains from smaller organizations, or actually from one industry to the other, for instance, from manufacturing to service, which may not be always the very best thing for the economy of a country. The second point is that we normally think that brain drain takes place from a less developed country to a more developed country, which is true, but we need to keep in mind that it's not necessarily true in all cases. For instance, in post-Second World War, Europe, there was a very big brain drain from Europe to the US. Actually, even now, the outflow from Europe to USA is fairly large. In some countries, larger than in others, but it's not as if it's just a developing economy which is the victim of brain drain. The third point is when we think in terms of positive, negative, or brain drain, we need to think in terms of person and public. What may be to the advantage of a person or a family is not necessarily to the advantage of the public, in the sense that a country may lose, whereas an individual may gain. Number four, brain drain does not mean necessarily drain, net drain, because there can be a situation where people return, there can be a situation where there is stimulation, if you like, of brain, which gets the benefit in terms of the application on return. And my fifth point is brain drain does not take place. So of course, it's true mainly for economic reasons, but not entirely for economic reasons. There are push factors like poor or non-existing institutions. There are push factors like unstable condition. And of course, there are pull factors like better opportunities of work and better market value. My last point, brain drain is not necessarily, does not involve, because we use the word brain and talk of drain, it doesn't necessarily involve the best brains. I taught for several years at a place called Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, which attracts some of the best students of the country. And many parents told me, look, I'm sending my son to USA because he doesn't have a chance to get admitted into IIM Cal. And indeed, that's very true. A large number of our institutions in India, for instance, Indian Institutes of Technology and Indian Institutes of Management, and there are others, have such high standards because the competition is so large that it's not necessarily, though very often yes, but not necessarily the best who go there. Now, I would like to highlight a few points about India quickly before I come to the problems and what's my take on the solution. You know, the God is visualized in India in terms of, when it is India, we must think of God. It's visualized in terms of Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Satyam stands for truth, Shivam stands for good, and Sundaram stands for beautiful. Very many Indians were very, very excited. They thought they had reached godhood when Sundar Pichai became the CEO of Google and Satya Nadella became CEO of Microsoft. Now, two of the largest organizations having two Indians, one with the name Sundar and the other with Satya. Some of my friends said, only thing that is missing is now Shivam, and we would have reached godhood. Now, this kind of thinking that if your people from your country are heading some of the best organizations abroad, then it means that your country has proved a point, is very typical of a country like India, in the sense that there is some element of satisfaction that Indians are doing it. And in fact, Indians are doing it in very many spheres. In the US, I'm told many of their universities will not be running if Indian professors were to withdraw. So I'm mentioning this along with the fact that a very number of students going from India to abroad, US in particular, has been increasing over time. So we need to be less enthusiastic about Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram when we think in terms of how our students are moving away, some of the best, moving away from India. Now, though brain drain is not just drain, as I said, but there is a heavy cost that a country like India or any other country has to pay, considering loss of human capital, which economists talk about. But please also understand, in terms of investment return that we have made. And with this, we need to consider that how do we then overcome this problem? My time is running out. Maybe in discussion I can come back. I'll cut short this brief presentation, but I would say that the idea is not to stop. The idea is not to put barriers. The idea is not to discourage. But the idea is, I think, to make bridges and not barriers. We must match aspirations with opportunities, potential with realization, personal with public, and today with tomorrow. And if we do that, there would be less reasons to go abroad, whether from Eastern Europe or India. There would be less reasons to go abroad, and if one does, there will be a more important reason to come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Munshi. Also, you stayed within your time. This little gadget tells me the truth, so wonderful. Thank you very much. So after our excursion to India, we will come back to Europe, another country heavily, let's say, influenced by the brain drain. We will hopefully in the debate come back to the costs and the benefits of brain drain for whom and how. And you mentioned the push factors, and we also see this, especially in countries where democracy is in decline, where a lot of people are pushed out, or where governance is very bad, or where corruption is very high, that people move on, as you have mentioned, because there are no chances to advance in the system through meritocracy. So, but before we come to the debate, let's hear Patru, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here to this event. It's a real honor and pleasure for me. Secondly, in terms of brain drain in Romania, I won't be speaking about general widespread facts, but I'll give you some examples of how is Romania affected by this phenomenon about brain drain. Unfortunately, Romania is one of the champions in terms of what can we do so we don't get in the Romania situation in terms of brain drain. And this for a few facts. Our population was about 22 million residents in 2000. Now it's currently less than 19 million. Abroad, in 2012, there were officially registered about 2 million Romanians. Now there are about 4.5 million Romanians living abroad the country. Our working labor in Romania declined to about 5.5 million people. So this means that we're currently facing a situation where we can't cover through our own population the amount of working spaces available in the economy. So we are heavily affected by this. Another major negative effect on Romania was in terms of economics. On one hand, brain drain has a positive effect. Those people living abroad send money to Romania to support the families and so on, which is, let's say, extra income for those poor families. But the biggest effect, unfortunately, is a negative effect. Basically because we don't have enough people working in Romania. We have a lot of people unemployed. We have a lot of people who reach their retirement age. And we don't have enough youngsters, people aged mostly between 27 and 35, to take up places in their economy. Secondly, Romania was very badly affected in terms of social effects. There are wide areas and cities in Romania that are literally depopulated, either because people moved to foreign countries to study or to work there, or they moved to the big cities. For example, Bucharest increased its population by 3 times in the last 3 years. So, on the other hand, Moldavia lost huge amounts of its population. Moldavia is one of the regions in Romania. A good effect of this brain drain is that when people leave the countries and go to, let's say, more developed countries, especially in terms of democracy and policies and social policies, they change shifts and attitudes in their home country. And for example, the last 2 presidential elections in Romania in 2009 and 2014 were decided by Romanians living outside the countries. In Romania constitution, people living outside the country are granted the right to vote to the national elections. So people living there, when they reach a European or an other country, they see a better working system in terms of social welfare, education, protection, legal rights, and so on. And they want to shift this system to the native country. And either by talking to their relatives, by friends, for various means of communications, or by voting, they can change the result of the vote in Romania. And another good thing is that they can shift attitudes and change behavior and how people see. Now, the worst part is that all these people living in the country, they either leave it to study abroad because their university offers them scholarships for research and innovation. In Romania, the field of research and innovation is one of the less area in the economics where money were invested in the last 10 years. So it's a major downgrade. Or they go to a foreign country to find a better job. But a better job not just in terms of the income per person, but in terms of how people look at me because I have this job. For example, teachers. Average income for a teacher in Romania is about 300 euros.
Yeah.
They're seen as the lowest of the working class. And they're not feeling good about themselves. They want to be respected because there are people who are educated, there are people who do these jobs out of passion, purely out of passion, and they want to be seen and highly esteemed. So they moved to a country not only for the money, but for this return of gratitude from the society for the quality of work that they are doing. Another example with the doctors, there's this myth in Romania that all the doctors are taking bribes for surgery or intervention or consultancies and so on. It's not the case, and I have friends who work both in the medical field or in the teaching field. Not everybody takes money for the services, but sometimes they are forced to accept these gifts in terms of money as an extra income to their support. But not everybody does that. There are literally people in Romania who do their work out of passion, and they want still living in Romania because they want to change things. They want to change things for the better. And unfortunately, after several years of struggling with this system, and when you see that nothing is improving to the better, they decided they have done enough, and they're moving abroad. And another negative aspect is, okay, if all these highly skilled, qualified people are leaving the country, who takes up to the jobs left in Romania? It's obviously that these jobs will be taken by those less qualified and less skilled, which is another major impact in terms for the, let's say, next 5 to 10 years. So what should governments do is not especially be concerned about the numbers of people leaving the country, but they should be rather more concerned about what can we do in our native countries to increase innovation, research and development in these particular fields. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bogdan, for your presentation. Anybody of the panel wanting to react to what the other panelists said? Not at this point in time.
No, I think Romania's situation is not that desperate.
Not that desperate.
So, I mean, Romania has
Typical,
the highest...
neighbors, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the last 4 years, after 2011, Romania has the highest growth rate in income, in Europe, and the highest GDP growth. there is a return migration to Romania, and there is an ample foreign investment coming to Romania. So I think, in a year or so, I mean, you will see the results in the statistics of the population statistics.
Yeah.
So I don't think Romania is that desperate.
Well, Romania is not, if I may...
And then you mentioned also that your migrants, they have the opportunity to vote and,
Yes.
and have an influence on the domestic political scene, which was very interesting. But maybe you wanted to respond
If I may answer to your question, yes, that's right. People started returning to Romania, but the people who left initially the country to go to either Italy, Spain, or Greece to work in mostly in agriculture or industry or construction building. Mm-hmm. So when the economic crisis hit those countries, they were left out of jobs there. So they moved to Romania. Mm. So
you have a return already.
Yeah.
What you mentioned that directly related to economic growth in the country itself, that there is a relationship between productivity.
If you look at the history of movement of populations, for 20-something centuries, so whenever you set a home, in another country, or you have some sort of occupation there, so you are already international. You are already global. So if you have an opportunity to go to another country, not back to your home country, be this Romania, Bulgaria, or Croatia, so you would stay or go to. Opportunities are ample. There is freedom to move. Irrespectively all the so-called refugee crises and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Look at whatever Croatia or ex-Yugoslav situation after the Balkan Wars. So the exchange of population was as high as 10%, so in 1 year, after the Dayton Accord, it was 1 year, 10% either country, was receiving, in terms of refugees. And they managed to deal with this. So if, Bulgarian situation is like 10% of the population left for 25 years, okay, so who cares? Relatives care.
Yes,
so
the relatives care.
I do care when I want to have well-qualified people working for me. I'm trying to be competitive. I'm trying to be as productive as, for example, German think tanks, because I'm running a consulting company, whatever. But, we are competitive.
Yeah, but you say
whenever we lose competitiveness, we lose brains.
Yeah, but you say you don't care. Then imagine, you need to have some medical treatment, and when all the first-class surgeon have left the country, and the domestic health system is degrading. So you don't care, or when you say that when they migrate, they move, so that, but it has an effect on Bulgaria, doesn't it?
The fact that some professionals leave is an alarm clock.
Okay,
so,
all right, we are.
In terms of surgeons and doctors, that basically is an alarm clock, for Bulgaria to redesign its healthcare system and the financing
to reform its health sector.
Yes.
And okay. And we have heard that it's very important domestically to reform. Sandra.
Maybe we were a little bit too negative about the brain drain from the perspective of the country of origin. So I would like to point two issues that are more positive and that should be stressed, in my opinion. The first one is that if there is an opportunity for people to find employment elsewhere, then this decreases the unemployment in the country of origin. So it lifts a little bit of pressure from the social security system, and maybe it's a very cynical perspective, but I think it should be mentioned. And the second is the fact that once you have new investments in the country of origin, or foreign investments in the country of origin, there is somewhere the pool of people, the pool of local people that can be attracted, and that understand both system, the local system and some other more competitive system. So those people are here and available. Most of them would like to return if the prospects were better in the country of origin. So there are positive sides of the brain drain.
Yeah, we had other positive sides, and Krassen, you mentioned the IT industry revival in Bulgaria. We have similar phenomena in some of the other neighboring countries. And as Professor Munshi mentioned, you also have parallel to, let's say, maybe universities or who are first class, also who are first class in the world. And when we look at university rankings, we see that Asian universities are rising in the ranks. Not so far for universities in this part of the world. I have checked the figures for Eastern Europe. They're not as promising. And you mentioned the teachers. What are the teachers doing when they go abroad? Well, I know in Bulgaria teachers are also miserably paid.
Most of them go to educational system as well.
They do?
Yeah, they do, because we have excellent teachers in terms of mathematics, physics, chemistry, and foreign languages. So they basically go to the same educational system abroad, or they decide to go for less qualified jobs. They're a teacher in the home country, but they had enough and they decide to go boss tables at the McDonald's in the United States, unfortunately.
So this is what we, in our little animation, showed as the brain waste. And whoever went to Berlin knows when he sits in a taxi and finds out that the taxi driver is a professional, a professor maybe from Iran or from other places where you have brain waste. Other reactions to what panelists said from your side? If that is not the case, I would like to involve you all. I mentioned in the beginning that you have the 3 questions, and let's try to answer those questions. I will read them to you, and I would like you to vote. And after that, your vote will go back to the panelists, and I would like the panelists to react to your opinions. The first question we have asked is, does the brain drain have a negative effect on the modernization process in the countries of origin? This is the first question, and I would like you to take the 2 cards, the red and the green card, and show me your vote. Where are you? Do you think it does, or do you think it does not? So, wow, this is very mixed, very interesting. My colleagues, they're trying to establish, let's say, more or less where we are in terms of figures and numbers. So keep it up a little bit longer. The first question was, does the brain drain have a negative effect on the modernization process in the countries of origin? To me, it looks fairly divided.
I think it's both.
Yeah, both is not possible. Oh, maybe it's possible, of course, but it was not meant like this, but thank you. And the second question, thank you for your vote. Second question, does the quality of education and universities influence the migration of students and graduates? This is rather, yes, this is green. The other one was, for me, looked 50-50. Here we have a clear vote, yes, it does. And the third question, when we formulated the third question, we thought, oh, this is an outrageous question, but current political developments show us that it's not so outrageous as we thought at the time. So the third question reads as follows: are restrictions on the freedom of movement in the European Union required in order to reduce the migration of highly skilled persons? And here we have also a clear result. It says no. I would like our panelists to respond to the 3 questions and your opinion on these questions. Professor Munshi, please.
Well, I must thank you all, because I think in some way you have confirmed my own position on the subject, in the sense that that there are negative consequences, but we need not think of negative consequences alone. There are also positive things like, brain regeneration and impact on return. Quality of education in universities, you have said yes, and I would agree with you. If the quality of education is better than because it's not just economic reason. It's not just poor salary, but the quality. And as far as barriers are concerned, again, we should not think in terms of barriers, and you have spoken very clearly on that. We need to create opportunities. And I think last point I would like to make, we need to learn from United States because one thing must be granted, the university system of the United States as well as the industry, they have a head-hunting attitude. They see talent somewhere, they go all out. They go all out to get the talented person, and I think that's one reason why the United States is doing well. And my last point, if you will allow me, please don't forget that the problem in the United States is of the opposite kind. You might remember Friedman, a very reputed journalist, wrote a book called The World is Flat.
Yes.
And there he tells American children, watch out, do your maths properly, otherwise Indians are coming.
Yeah. And we know from PISA and other studies that certain country students have surpassed, especially the United States, I believe.
Right,
you know, you
right.
find Asian students on top among Finnish and others.
Right.
All right, that was the first reaction to your three votes on our questions. Krassen, yes, please.
Very briefly, I don't understand the second question actually, because I give you an example. My university, Sofia University, which is the oldest in the country, it loses about 2,000 students every year. Most of them go abroad. So the best university of the country, I lobbied for its registration when I was a member of the Constitutional Assembly like 25 years ago. The American University in Bulgaria contributes to brain drain or migration because of its high quality. It's better than many of the American universities. It's better than the American University in France, in Paris. So, and many of the Bulgarians, or not only Bulgarians, Kazakhs, Azeris, even Czechs, you know, Croats, you know, who study in that university, they come because of the good rate of the university in placing graduates of that university in the international arena. Yeah. So, high quality contributes to migration, and the low quality contributes to migration. So I don't know how to answer this question.
Yeah, but do you think that all your societies have to invest more in education?
Yes.
Yes. So there's
absolutely.
I think that the difference between Sofia and American University is that American University is private, and private universities in Bulgaria are doing much better. Yeah. One of the first reforms we did was, immediately after the first elections, we did two reforms. Number one is to privatize the universities, and number two, to change the accounting system. So, it matters. Yeah. So the more private the system, you know, the better.
Well, or competition maybe between them,
Yeah.
But we should not only be carried away by university education. I believe what's also important is if you have miserably paid teachers, and in most countries you do have that for primary schools, this is where it all starts, basically. So that is also an important part. Any other reaction from the panel on the vote? Sandra?
Well, I think that for general reasons we should invest more in education, but if people are more educated and there are no chances for them to get employed, then they're only frustrated and they flee away, they go away even more, even easier. So I think that the level of education should, in the second step, influence the democratization of the society and the investment climate in the country, and so on and so forth. And I would agree with you that in some cases, or in most cases, although in Croatia the universities are not well ranked and they offer quite a non-competitive education, most students are satisfied with that because they don't have to learn much and they don't have to struggle during the studies. So most of them are happy with that. And in our country, it's the most important thing is to get the diploma, not to get the knowledge, but to get the diploma. And that is the
Don't
problem.
worry, Sandra, about the rankings. You know, German universities are also not ranking very well in those international comparative studies. I would like to give Professor Munshi the opportunity, and then I can already see fingers going up, and we are going back to the audience.
Well, I think, you know, all of us, I think, in this room would agree that we need to invest in education more and more, and not just education, but good education. Education that is proper education and not just diploma-oriented. But I would like to add another point, since the panel represents a good deal of Eastern Europe as well as a country like India. I think, you know, we need to, when we are thinking in terms of education, we need to think also in terms of the following. We should not just produce employees.
Yeah.
Because you produce employees, they're looking for jobs, they don't exist, they feel frustrated, they go away, and so on. We should also educate for people to create employment for others. So in other words, entrepreneurial attempts should be made, our education should be reorganized in such a manner that we not only create diploma holders who want jobs, but we also want people who want to give jobs. And in this respect, a country like India and countries of Eastern Europe are not in a disadvantage, but are in an advantage, because these are not saturated markets. And therefore, if we think like this, suddenly what appears hopeless becomes extremely hopeful, because compared to the saturated markets, the future lies with us.
Absolutely right. So we're talking about entrepreneurship and people
If I may
who
say
want
a
to
few
make their
words
mark.
as well, please.
I would like to turn it to the audience because they're really, they're itchy, you know, I saw so many hands going up. So who wants to be the first? The young gentleman, then I go to, first we have the older gentleman and then we have the young gentleman. Please.
Good morning, thank you. I'm only 77
No,
years young.
please, there's a microphone for you.
I am only 77 years young. So therefore, thank you for giving honor to the older people.
Well, I also belong to the category or soon to be, so.
I think if you talk about university, it's already too late. Education is the most important, is the primary and secondary school. And that's where you should have the best brain and the best paid.
It's true.
You have the lowest paid to be primary school, and they can't even make 25 square.
Yeah,
So therefore they come out all stupid. And then you have stupid university students, so what good does it do?
yeah.
I think the whole world should concentrate on primary and secondary school, have the best paid profession, like Finland,
The
for
pay
example.
alone is not enough, also the methods and the way you teach. Thank you very much.
Pay is important.
Yes,
if you
it is.
pay the lowest pay, nobody has brain to go to that profession.
But it's not alone, I would like to add.
I understand.
Yes, thank you.
Understand. That is primary concern is the education. University is maybe a little too late.
Yeah.
Now for the brain drain,
Yes.
okay, you always look when you go to university. Now when I got my PhD from London, my friend said, no, PhD is not enough. You got to get another degree. I said, what's that? BTA. I said, what is BTA? Been to America. So almost all the graduates all go to America, learn the experience. You know why? Because when you're a student, you're poor. And as soon as you graduate, you go to America, you become middle class. You have a car, you have a nice apartment, you enjoy life. Okay, that's an attraction.
Nodding, although.
And then it's up to you, after the American experience, what you like to do.
Okay.
If you want to go home and create employment. For example, I spent 10 years in UK, 6 years in Boston, and I went back to Thailand, and I create employment for 3,000 people.
So you are
And if
a
everyone
prime
does-
example of how the brain drain works in a
In
wonderful
reverse.
way.
Yeah, help
Thank
the
you.
country, but you have to be brave enough. But lots of people, when they got to United States, they got stuck with the income, and they don't go back. And that's a drain. And that's it. So
Okay, thank you very much for this contribution. So primary school education is very important to prepare they're young. And now we have you,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. My name is Jan Trnka from Charles University in Prague, and I think one part of the brain drain equation is missing from the discussion, and that's the responsibility of the receiving countries. Because the impression that I got from the panel was that it's basically, it's the country's own fault when people are leaving, and the receiving countries somehow deserve the brains to come to them. But in fact, I don't think that's true, in fact.
You don't think it's true? Oh.
No, I don't think it is, because I think what is in play here is what's called the Matthew effect. Basically, those who have will be given more. So the countries that already were wealthy and they could afford good education and to pay these highly skilled people more, they are getting more highly skilled people and they are getting even wealthier. So it's actually not fair to say, well, everyone deserves the level of skilled workers or the amount of skilled workers that they have. It's not true. I mean, there was sort of an admiration for the headhunter attitude of the USA, but I mean, we can kind of hear neo-colonial attitudes there. They're just picking the brains because they can afford it. But Romania might not be able to afford it. And so I think what is important and unfortunately there's no one in the panel, well maybe you are, from a receiving country, from primarily receiving country, but I think those countries should realize that they actually have a responsibility, and if they do take the people, they should give something back. And it may be the education that they provide the people and they come back with that, but I think there's more to that, and maybe it would be interesting to hear what the panel thinks about that.
Thank you very much. You made your point. I take one more question. Yes, and then I go back to the panel. We have not that much time left, but it will be sufficient. Sir.
Edward Utrata, retired public servant. 2 points I think were not touched on. One is, you've all been assuming that the returnee is going to be welcomed in his country.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's not always the case.
It's true.
Could I have the opinion of the panel on that?
Yeah.
There's a second point, the other way, I think, a little bit. Very often the second generation becomes very important in this respect, because it grows up, of the émigré. They grow up in two cultures and end up often returning what the country may have lost in the generation before. Again, I'd like the opinion of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Zafar, I saw your hand, and I make an exception for you. Zafar Khan from Pakistan. Please, try to be brief.
Very brief. Maybe the conversation part, brain is something which is tied to locale. But we are living in a kind of economy where I live in Pakistan, but maybe I am offering services which have been outsourced by an American company or a European company. So will the worthy panelist describe that category or that set of people who are working for internationals while being physically at a local place, where they will put their brain? Is it drained or gained or something new?
Thank you very much for that question. So I think we have a lot of questions to answer here on the panel, and I see Professor Munshi already raising his hands. You will be the first, sir.
Very, very quickly, headhunting, I have admiration for it, though not physical headhunting, but I think it's not just a matter of financial problem or commercial points. We need to develop the countries which are losers by way of people going out. We need to develop the mentality of rewarding, with whatever resources we have, talent. And this rewarding talent is one attitude that United States has more than, in my eyes, any other country. And I think that accounts for their success. So there is something to be learned there, in my eyes. But I'm quite aware that it's not just your attitude, but it's also the market condition. But I think we should not overlook the attitude part. The number 2 point, the points are about returning. Indeed, I had it on my mind that when I said private gain and private loss versus public gain and public loss, what a person who goes abroad and settles down, what he thinks is his gain by way of a car or a flat and so on, there are also losses in terms of double marginalization, the misfit syndrome and so on. And there are a number of movies which have gone into this issue and shown it perhaps better than social science research. And the last point, sir, from you with respect to people working in one place and working for customers elsewhere, I had it on my mind, but I didn't discuss this because it would have complicated the discussion. Somewhere the discussion on brain drain makes no sense because we do not live in one country. We live in the world, and the economy of the world, the manner in which functions, or the manner in which you function, even if you're physically serving and not through your laptop, when you're physically serving a particular company, the economies of the world have got so closely bound that it makes very little sense to talk of national boundaries alone. But there I would make a distinction. If we live in the world economy, so we must ask who stands to benefit more. And there countries like yours and mine need to ask very hard questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Munshi. Sandra, please, your second.
Yes, I would like to refer to the first question. And I must say that my point of view is very market-oriented in that respect. And I think that the locations compete. They compete even for the talents. And in these competitions, there are winners and there are losers. And losers have to cope with their losses. And I don't think that the recipient countries have to compensate the losers. Why? So that is my answer to the first question. And I would also like to refer to the third question, whether there is a brain drain if people work for multinationals or for international companies or organizations and stay within the country. I don't think it should be called a brain drain because those people pay taxes in their countries of origin, so they contribute to the society. And on the other hand, they also contribute to the society through various spillovers. If they are well educated, they educate their colleagues, their students, so there are spillovers to the society from them, so it should not be called a brain drain.
But I mean, remittances are a major economic factor. You know, they are 3 times the size of development aid. So it's not just, but they pay taxes in a different country. That is true. Yeah. Thank you. So Bogdan, your last one, and then I come to Krassen and then say a few words. We are 9:17. We have then to make a move.
Well, in terms of investments in schools or quality of education, everybody talked about investing in raising teachers' salaries, but that's not just the only place where we need to do more investments. We also need to invest in research and innovation and encourage research and innovation in your own country. We also need to invest in the quality of educational materials and to provide the schools and the educational system, especially primary and secondary education system, with all the necessary means for a proper education. Not just giving salaries and raising salaries to the teachers, but also assuring a better education and a better educational system. And secondly, about headhunting and recruiting, well, let's not be hypocrites. Nobody is headhunting for our builders, agricultures, farmers, and so on. Developed countries will always headhunt and try to recruit the best possible minds worldwide, and we can't compete with that. What we can do is to try and balance somehow the brain drain from the country and the quality of what we're getting back via different channels or services. Thank you
very much, Bogdan. And Krassen, response to the 4 questions?
I don't think people go abroad to study or to work or to live in order to pay taxes over there. Yeah. They go for some other idea. You know, they go for their own benefit. They would like to help themselves and their loved ones. And similar is the case with outsourcing and foreign investment. So people come to invest in Pakistan or Bulgaria or any other country in order to make profit. And provided they make profit, they have the opportunity to support, you know, the workforce and the tax system and that sort of stuff. If they don't make profit, you know, that's a loss. Otherwise, it's a gain. And return migration, returnees. If a returnee is a lousy guy who becomes a finance minister and does a lousy job, you know, it's bad.
You have a special example in mind,
if there is someone, you know, who is coming with the savings and ideas and knowledge, you know, gained in other country, that's okay.
All right. I hope we have answered your questions more or less, and we have not fully exhausted the topic. However, the time is cruel. It's 9:20, and in 5 minutes' time or so, we should be upstairs for the official opening. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the panelists for being with us and sharing their insights into the topic, and I would like to thank you all for coming to this breakfast. As you have seen, from our voting, there was anonymity, you could say, on the questions, or we were divided 50-50. However, I believe that we have all realized how complex the issue is, and that we maybe at times think too much in comparative static terms instead of dynamics. Nowadays, let's say, you mentioned people fluent in 2 societies. My children, they are what's called third culture kids. The world is, as Professor Munshi said, a very small place, and people don't move finally forever somewhere, but people move around and they come back, and their children have again other paths. But overall, we live in a competitive environment, and it is good like that to reward the ones who are eager to go out and eager to make their mark. And what we need is to reward talent and allow people a perspective. And here governments, especially in Eastern Europe, are asked to do more on the reform front domestically to make their countries a more livable place, where people feel at home and people feel that they have a future. So with this, I would like to thank all of you again and let you go upstairs where the next big activity is happening. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. And please give everybody a big hand. Thank you.
Thank you.